The following is an excerpt from a longer conversation between my son, Ben Wagner, and me on May 10th, 2020. Enjoy.
With everything that's going on, it's never been more in the forefront of my mind of how much of a war on our minds there really is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. From every angle.
and one of the interviews I saw recently was pretty interesting. It was with I believe a former general of the U.S. military. I don't know what branch of the military, but a former general, and he was explaining that oil for almost the past like 100 years or so, since since the industrial revolution and the global sort of trade really started to kick into high gear, that oil was the driving commodity
Definitely.
to dictate foreign policy. And it was it was double-sided. It was like if there was a country that had oil that we could get, or if there was a country that needed oil that we could sell it to them in order to build up their industrial
Right.
footprint. So he said that for up until recently, oil was basically the gold standard for government policies. That's how government policies were structured around almost the concept of either their need of oil or their ability to provide oil. And
Right.
he said that has changed, not just because of new greener technologies and the sort of awareness that maybe oil isn't the best thing that we should be using anymore, and there's other alternative, like there's a growing number of alternatives that seem to be coming about due to technology. He said that it hasn't changed just from that. He said it's actually become data is now the commodity that drives policies and the world's policies. And I found that fascinating because he was talking about China in this whole interview. He was basically talking about China, and he's like, basically, it's an information war. That's what it is. It's nothing more than a
For sure, when they're
data-driven
hacking
information
things.
war.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's not like we're not doing it either. We're doing stuff too. We're collecting data. We're using
Right.
data for our benefit. They're using
Yeah.
data for they're crunching the numbers, and they have certain things that we don't in terms of their ability to track and their sort of authoritarian regime allows them certain
Privileges.
they can mine certain pieces of data in a way that we don't necessarily do it yet. And it was just interesting to hear him talk in terms of data being the global currency, basically.
That is interesting. It's hard to conceive at,
Yeah.
but you get it. I mean, you can get it with specifics. Like if they can find out how, some of our scientists have discovered, they can take it up from there and work on it. Right. So they just gave them a big leg up in the competition.
I think he briefly mentioned the Cambridge Analytics fiasco, and in terms of that, if you think about things where you're a company that can collect data on American citizens, or like Facebook, or you are an app in Facebook, which was basically how Cambridge Analytics got so much information on voters and stuff like that, and then you can sell that to the Chinese government, and the Chinese government has that data now. And so there's that kind of, in terms of that being a currency, it's really interesting.
Of warfare.
In a form, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
In a form of global supremacy, in a form of trying to win the race, or whatever the fuck they're if it's wanting to be the superpower, wanting to be the richest, wanting to be the most dominant military,
yeah,
the most powerful, right? That the most lucrative commodity is now data.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Funny you say that about oil, because I just saw Midway last night, which is, is about one of the first major battles between the Japanese and America in World War II. And but they kind of started like 4 years before the war even started. And one of the head Japanese guys was talking to an ambassador from the United States, and he was saying, whatever you do, don't cut us off from oil, because we Japanese get 80% of our oil from the United States. If you cut that off, we won't have no choice but to go to war with you, because we need it. I mean, you cannot run tanks and planes and ships without that. So we need it. Like we can't, everything stops if we don't get it.
Right.
So we have to have it no matter what. And that was the case with, as a matter of fact, I read this thing that was kind of like basically World War II through the eyes of oil. And it was amazing how much that whole war, how many things in that war were aimed at oil, determined by oil. I mean, it was amazing. What I had no idea oil was such, but of course, if you think about it, I mean,
well, yeah, you think about the military
vital,
machines, right? The military machines, the machinery required to operate, to build, to run, to mobilize, all of those
plus
things.
Your own factories back home that make things all needs energy, coal and oil. The people moving around, trucks moving goods around, they need oil. I mean, everything that was based on, and is for the most part still based on oil. You take away the oil and you're hurting. I mean, you can't even function. You can't function as a country, much less actually operate a war. I mean, it's super vital, super vital, and still is, but getting less so. Thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
Even Saudi Arabia is going toward investing in solar companies and stuff like that. They see the writing on the wall. It's like, while we got this huge cash flow coming in, we should be investing in the replacement of oil. Even though they have, probably the biggest reserves in the world.
Yeah, but I think one of the cool things to come out of this whole Russia Saudi oil dispute war over the price that has made the bottom fall out underneath the oil prices is it's made a lot of top officials be like, okay, we need to fucking get off of this shit.
Yeah, absolutely. We should have been off it a long time ago. It just, it leaves us too vulnerable to that kind of stuff. It's just, it's not sustainable for us. It's just not. And that's what we were trying to do with the open fuel standard was it would have been a way to really completely make us independent energy wise. And it would have been such a great thing. But the oil industry crushed it.
Of course.
That's what they do.
Well, they're going to, pardon my pun, but they're going to soak up every last drop.
Yeah.
They're gonna take
same thing as the cigarette.
Last bit.
Yeah. They just postpone it as long as possible. Make hay while there's, while we're still dependent on it, and make us dependent on it as long as we can before it goes down,
Yeah, it's hard to argue with profits when you're at those board meetings.
Yeah.
Okay, that's our podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. You can find out about our other podcasts at theatombomb.org. This is Adam Lee Kahn on The Atom Bomb.